Hello and welcome once again to Action for Animals. Today, a somewhat sad conversation, but one which has a light at the end of the tunnel. Today, we're discussing the way some horses are treated on our island. And no, it's not always the beautifully well cared for race horses that we see. There are others who are not so well cared for or not treated very well. And the light at the end of the tunnel, the Horse Charity. And we're lucky to have with us today the president of Horse Charity, Monique Archer. And HORSE stands for the Humane Organization for the Relief of Suffering Equines. And you know that equines are horses. Before we chat with Monique, though, let's visit her stables and see the correct way to treat and show respect for horses.
I am choosing to get on using a mountain block to just help his back out so that I'm not straining his back by standing on the ground and wrenching it to get on. I also am going to try to land in the saddle as softly as I can because they have backs that have feelings like ours and you just don't want to injure them. So just very gently, and then you can put your weight in the stirrups. I just like to let the horse get a chance to stretch its neck a little bit and let its body warm up. Just like if you were going to the gym, you'd take it a little bit easy before you started doing anything too stressful. So you start and walk, and in some cases you can then ease into canter, which is sometimes an easier stride than trot, or you can go through trotting. And it's important that when you're around these animals that you have proper safety gear on. I love them dearly, but they can hurt you, and they're big, and sometimes they don't mean to. So wearing the correct boots and helmet are probably the most important things. Boots to stop your foot getting stepped on. They can damage your toes quite badly if they step on them. A horse weighs about 1,200 pounds, so they're quite heavy. And in terms of your head, well, you want to protect that at all costs because very often if you ride, you will fall at some point, and it's better that your head is protected. So this is all important. The other thing to consider too is where you're riding your horse. It's a little bit wet out here today, so I'm not going to do too much with him. But you don't want to be on slippery surfaces, and you certainly don't want to be doing a lot of galloping or cantering, any galloping or cantering on road surfaces, which is one of the things that we get a lot of complaints about and concerns. There have actually been fatalities in Barbados with people that are riding horses on the road, and they get loose and they end up colliding with a vehicle, and the horse dies, and sometimes people in the car die too. So it's just about proper care and looking after them. Our job is to make sure that we look after these guys because they don't have the ability to speak like we do. And it's just, you want to be really careful of horse welfare and things like I've made sure that the saddle fits him well. It's not pinching his back. He's got a nice thick pad, or the white pad, which is a saddle blanket or saddle pad with another half pad on top of it to give extra cushioning. And the bit is a nice soft bit in his mouth. It's not hurting him in any way. So I'm going to ease him into a trot here now, and that'll be the next pace that he'll move through. I'm just asking him to stretch here. Different horses work in different ways. He's coughing because he's been napping and he's been inhaling the dust from his sawdust that he sleeps on, so he's clearing out his lungs.
On Action for Animals, we team up with the animal advocacy group, Action for Animals Barbados, and we seek to enlighten, to educate, and to let you know the correct way, the importance of proper care for our animals. And today the animals we're discussing are horses and the work of the horse charity.
So he is basically he was the foal of a mare that we were called to rescue. She was being raced while pregnant and almost skeletal up and down the main road by some young boys. And it was a danger. As I mentioned when I was writing earlier, there have been fatalities in Barbados where horses have gone through the windscreen of vehicles and the people inside the car have not survived. So we brought her in, and she was actually at the charity, and she was so badly malnourished that we didn't know that she was close to having him. And it was only that a friend of mine went up there who deals with a lot of breeding, because we weren't really that familiar with it, and found out that he said to me, you know she's about to have this foal. So
she was so skinny that you could even tell that she
no, she was tiny. She was tiny for what she should have been. And I guess also maybe the stress of what they'd been doing to her didn't help. So we brought her up here, because the other thing too is sometimes when they're having foals, they need someone around, because if it goes wrong, the foal and the mare can die. So he came down here and he was born here, and then we adopted him. And the mom is actually at our charity in St. Thomas. So she's still around. She was a decent racehorse, as I understand it, but she was just given away to some children. And I would say that's one of the big challenges that we continue to face. It's not as bad as it was, but it's still pretty bad.
You know, I'm sure you all remember throughout this series I've mentioned there are two animals that I am about. Well, yes, snakes, but not. But cats and horses, and I might have mentioned that little nibble I got, which I was told was in play as a child, but it's always made me a little wary of horses. But they are beautiful animals. And Monique, how did you get involved? First of all, welcome.
Thank you.
But how did you get involved with horses?
It happened purely by accident, because neither of my parents rode. Was visiting family in Northern Ireland. They had a farm and they had a little black and white pony, and they asked if my sister and I wanted to have a ride, and that was it. I was hooked. I got back here and I nagged my poor mother until she found somewhere that I could get riding lessons, and that's it. And the rest is history. I just love them.
Tell me about the personality, because they do, and all of them have different personalities. But tell me about the personalities of a horse. What, we know of dogs and so on, but they're such huge animals who look like if they really don't want to give us the time of day.
Like any other animal, I mean, what we see in horses is a reflection of how they're treated. So I personally have never found horses are inherently wicked. I think they're lovely animals. They're intelligent. They don't have a massive brain, but they learn commands. Research is identifying more and more how many words they can actually understand in our language. We see it a lot in the training, in the communication. They're amazing to see with children especially, and people that don't really know what they're doing. I have watched horses that, if I got on the horse, for example, they might be a little bit challenging and maybe what we would say a little bit naughty. And then I have put
children on them and led them around, or the same horse has taught young children to ride on their own without ever putting a foot wrong. They're, to me, they're the best animal on the planet.
Of course you would think so.
I love all animals. I have a lot of rescued cats and dogs, and I'm always trying to save as many animals as I can, but horses definitely hold a special place in my heart.
How do they show affection?
They'll call to you if you come out in the morning. They'll whinny when you come out in the morning and they see you in the paddock, because they know that you love them and you usually have treats for them, and they'll nuzzle you, so you'll walk by and they'll take their, I know you probably wouldn't be too fond of this, but they'll take their muzzles and they'll communicate by just rubbing their muzzles against your neck or your shoulder. Sometimes they'll give you playful bites.
That's what I think I encountered, but I didn't realize it was in play.
They can hurt, so we don't really encourage the horses to do that. At the end of the day, they are lovely animals, but they're big, strong animals. So they have to have manners and respect, and they have to understand that maybe certain things they might do playing with their friend, another horse in the paddock, doesn't really work that well with humans. They can cause us an injury.
Well, we can see sometimes the beautiful moves in the dressage and so on. So we know they're intelligent and they're easily trained.
Yes.
But surely there's some who, like any other animal, any other creature, just, I want to do this today.
Well, a former coach of mine said something that I think is extremely true. Every horse has its preferred job, and they let you know that. So if a horse doesn't like horse racing, you're going to find out. It's not going to win races for you, no matter what you try and do. If a horse doesn't like polo, you're never going to get near that ball, or it's not going to ride off another horse. If a horse doesn't like eventing, the sport I do, they're maybe not going to want to jump. And so you very quickly find out what they like. Some just want to be companions. Some people like to have them just to go for a ride out in our beautiful countryside. So there's all kinds of things they can do. Some of them work with, we've had them work with the children with exceptionalities from the learning center and the schoolhouse, and watching the bonding between those children and the horses that we've rescued is really incredible.
And then they also have enough heart to be really great therapy animals.
Yes, they do. They really can reach children. When I see some of the children that have come there frightened, very withdrawn, not wanting to do anything, and after a few months they're laughing, they're bathing the horses, they're riding, they're trotting, some of them are riding on their own and cantering on their own. It's really heartwarming to see that.
Expensive to look after though?
Yes, they are expensive to look after. To care for a horse properly, unless you're blessed to have a large piece of land with good pasturage and good fencing, it's going to cost you upwards of 700 Barbados a month to care for them. At the top levels, when you start looking at racing and so on, you're talking over $2,000 a month to have a horse.
To home them in terms of
stabling,
and
feed,
grooms,
farriers.
Trainers.
They have to have their teeth done minimum of once a year. So equine dentists, trainers, vets, things inevitably will happen.
Yes.
It's not cheap.
We're going to continue this discussion because if you're like me, I'm learning so much here about a beautiful animal, huge, but one which we've all looked and admired just recently with the Gold Cup. Amazing to see the rapport between jockey and horse, trainer and horse, and in those the behavior sometimes in trying just to get them into the gate. The starting gate is amazing. Some prefer to go in backwards. So we're going to discuss all things horses, but of course there's also the other side when we don't look after them, the way that we should. And we're going to talk about that too when we come back. Today on Action for Animals, we're talking about horses. And we've just learned how highly intelligent they are, how empathetic they are, and also how playful they can be. Now, one of the things that we learn about horses, I think, is that they need to be, no, I said shooed, but it's shod, okay? They need to be shod. So we always learn that you see this gentleman filing the horse's hoof. And what happens though when they're not in your care, if they're just in the wild?
I think in the wild, from young, they don't have on shoes, and they get used to it. In fact, some places I've gone, I've seen them riding horses with just front shoes on, maybe, and no back shoes, through some very rough terrain. But it takes time, I think, to get them used to it. And if you're not careful, and depending on what the horses have been used to, if you don't care for them correctly, or as they have been used to be, but like if you wore shoes all the time, and then I told you to go up by Animal Flower Cave and run around on the side of the cliff, you're probably not going to like it very much.
Right.
It's the same thing. They're a bit harder, than we are, but it's still going to be sore, and you can end up with stone bruises and abscesses that are extremely painful for them, and that can lead to other complications. It can cause them to bear excess weight in one of their other legs, and that can then cause conditions like laminitis.
What's that?
Laminitis is where the lamina of the hoof separates, and it can actually can result in you having to euthanize the horse. So it can be a very difficult condition to treat and to have a horse recover from.
Now that you mentioned that, I've often wondered, I remember over the years, as a child living near the garrison, you would hear of a horse being put down because of a broken leg.
Yes.
And you always wondered, well, can't it heal? Can they put it in a cast or something?
Yeah. Certain breaks can heal. It depends on where and how severe. It is very difficult if it's a severe break, especially higher up. The weight that they bear, and it's very difficult to get them to comply. They are smart, but they're not maybe like a human where you could give certain instructions,
right,
and they can understand that they need to do something for their own good. So it can be challenging.
Right. Let's talk about the horse charity. How did that come about?
I had been rescuing horses from a child, just finding them out in areas where maybe they weren't being cared for. My uncle's actually Dr. Will Huey from the RSPCA. So poor man used to get me on the phone regularly. Uncle Will, I found another one. And they would come out, Inspector Norville would come out, and he would help the horse if he could, or we would speak to the people. Sometimes they might give them up. Sometimes we had to put the horse down depending on what was wrong with it. But it's just come naturally to me, and about 10 years ago I decided that I should try to formalize an organization to look after horses specifically, because they're big animals, they're not easy to look after. If there's a report, often people don't know what to do, who to call, how to handle them.
Well, tell us now.
Well, we have our number. I use my business number, which is Archers Hall. That's 422-0400, and you can call there, and they can track me down, or Robert Pierce, who helps, Julie Ray, my husband. There are a number of people associated that will come forward and help. Dr. Laura Williams, Dr. Gus Reeder have helped us a lot over the years. We don't have any power of seizure. We've chosen to not request that permission through the Ministry of Agriculture. We like to keep one degree of separation because we all own horses, and so it's best to have a vet involved to make decisions on what needs to happen with a horse. But if there's been a bad accident, a horse with a car or something, we've seen collisions with horses and vehicles. That's terrible.
I remember one down not Spring Garden Highways, the Mighty Griner, but it was Spring Garden at the time. That was horrific.
Yeah. And people have been killed on the road with horses coming through the windscreen. if they get loose. Sometimes it's because horses aren't kept correctly, and other times it's just bad luck. Sometimes a horse will break down a fence and get out of a fenced area, but most of the cases it's from having horses in places that they shouldn't be. What we see a lot of, sadly, is horses are intended to race, or people get them as racehorses and have these high hopes of, the Gold Cup scenario. And then it doesn't work out. The horse breaks down in terms of injuring a tendon, or something else goes wrong, or they're just not particularly fast, or they don't like to load in the gates, or there's a number of scenarios. And we have a lot of great racehorse owners, so this is not by any means, I'm not picking on that sport. It's just, unfortunately, I would say about 90 to 95% of the horses that we have been called to are former racehorses. Doesn't work out, and as I mentioned, they cost a lot.
Yeah.
And instead of taking a difficult decision to euthanize the animal, because people don't have the money to, let's say, keep the horse. A horse can live for 30 years.
Wow.
Right? So if you do the math at $2,000 a month, or let's say $700 as a minimum, by 12 months, by 30 years, that's a lot of money. And sadly, they get given away to the first person that says, I'll take it. And often that person really is not equipped either with the knowledge, maybe with the finances, to be able to care for the horse. And this is what leads to most of the problems that we see here.
That's so unfortunate.
It is.
I think that people see a horse grazing and they think that that's all they need to eat.
Yeah.
That's not the only nutrition they need.
No. Thoroughbreds especially are very difficult to keep weight on. You'll see certain breeds, like in Argentina, for example, a lot of those horses just can survive very well off of grass, and they look fat and happy. Thoroughbreds need a lot more nutrition, many more calories, and with that they need a certain amount of exercise, because like anything, the more food you put in, the more energy you're giving, the more likely you are to have a problem with the horse behaving bad or being a bit wild or unmanageable. So they're not necessarily the easiest breed to have and take care of unless you have the knowledge that you need to have.
Is our grass here?
No.
You need to supplement?
Yes. Unless you are lucky and you're one of the people that have actually cultivated the correct type of grass.
Which
is? Pangola hay is one that grows well here.
Pangola hay, okay.
But very few people have that. And if they do, it's for baling to sell the hay. It's not pasturage for horses to graze in. But our sour grass, which would be typical, it can give them some roughage, but it's not going to be enough to keep them looking well. And they need to eat. I mean, things about horses are grazing animals. So they need to be eating consistently, or they can get very, very sick if they don't. They can get colic, they can get ulcers.
In movies, you see people treating them with apples and carrots.
Yes.
So that's good for them as well?
Yes, apples, carrots. Some of them love mangoes. I had a horse that used to suck a mango, like how you would see a Bajan sucking a mango in the sea. This horse would literally suck the mango clean and spit the seed out. What? So some fruit is good for them. Obviously, you wouldn't try and give them too many human things like cookies and bread or meat or anything like that. But fruit is good, but we would typically give that as a treat and stick more to the grass and the feed.
Okay. When we come back, remember we spoke with Philippa Williams a few weeks back, and she spoke about equine therapy. Well, let's take a look at the empathetic side of horses when we come back. We always like to remind you that our animals are sentient beings. They see, they hear, they taste, they touch, they feel. And today we're talking about horses, and we learned that they're really, really great as therapy animals. So let's talk about that side.
Well, we had, again, from very early in the horse charity's existence, there were two things that I wanted to do other than rescue horses and look out for them. That is the main objective of the charity. But I also wanted to be able to make these amazing animals available for therapy. Special needs children that have responded so wonderfully to their interaction with them. And to me, I guess what's even more touching is these horses have been rescued.
Yeah.
And so they weren't treated very well. And then they come back to give incredible love and confidence and just a great sense of purpose. These children are so excited when they get to come and interact with the horses.
And they learn to ride. And
Yes, they do whatever they're comfortable doing. That's
Okay.
important. If they're scared and they don't want to get on, some of them might just want to pat them and look at them. But usually they gradually build their confidence up and they enjoy doing more and more. And some of them have gone all the way up to trotting and cantering on their own, completely unassisted.
Well, we learned about that watching you walk first and then trot.
Yes.
You know, and you mentioned that the horse is something like 1,800 pounds.
Yeah, they can get huge. An average horse is 1,200 pounds. And obviously ponies would be a little bit less, and then the
Right.
very big horses would be more. But they weigh a lot.
What's the maximum weight they can carry, human-wise, I mean?
They try to use 20% of the horse's weight as a benchmark.
Ah, okay.
That's what they've come out with recently as a guide, to be fair to the animal.
Right. And how long should they be kept? Like in terms of racing, how long should they be at that maximum speed?
Well, they tell you how long they can have a career like that for. Racing is a particularly difficult career on horses. They start very young. That's something I think horse people around the world, a lot of trainers and included, would like to see horses started a bit later because they start racing and training before their bones and tissues are properly formed, which is why a lot of them get the injuries that they get.
So how old would that be then, the better time?
You would want ideally to wait until they were 3 or even better, 4 years old. Yeah, they're big animals.
Yeah, but you don't realize because you see them racing at
2.
You're 2.
Yeah.
Okay, and what would you consider then to be their basic needs?
They need to have a good amount of food, a balanced diet. So that would be grass and grain, so pellets. Pollard is another feed that we can use that's slightly less expensive but has a good nutritional value. As I said, lots and lots of grass. Water is key. I think one of the things that we see that causes the most dramatic decline in horses is lack of water. Especially at this time of year when it's this dry.
They're
You can see a
dehydrated.
horse drop 100 pounds in 10 to 12 days.
What?
Easily. And they really...
Water,
and they're,
please.
Yes.
Water.
And not just once a day. You can't just fill up a bucket of water and leave it for your horse in the morning in this heat and come back to them the next day. It's not enough. Our horses drink buckets and buckets of water in this heat. Shoeing is important. Worming a few times a year.
How often do you shoe the horse?
We shoe them every 4 to 5 weeks.
Every 4? Okay.
Their hooves are like our fingernails.
Right.
So if you could imagine, you probably want to trim your
I never
fingernails
thought of
once
that.
a month.
Yes.
So it's the same thing.
Okay.
As I said,
Worming. Sorry, I
worming.
interrupted you.
Yeah, worming at least every 6 months, ideally every 3 months, because we do have parasites in the tropics. You would know you treat
Right.
your dogs and cats for worms. Horses are the same. It can cause them to get dull coats, just not gain weight because parasites are getting all the benefit of the food that you're feeding them. An equine dentist is important at least once a year because they can get sharp, pointy teeth that will stop them from being able to chew properly, so they don't
Right.
digest their food well. Those are the basic grooming, just brushing them, taking care of their coats.
I can't believe we have 3 minutes left already. I have so many questions, as you can
We have
see.
to do a part 2.
You know, so, okay, how do you rehabilitate a horse? Do they have
Gradually.
memories like elephants? You hear how they remember their torture or their
They do.
trauma? They do.
They do. We've had some that sadly could not be rehabilitated because they'd become so vicious from what had been done to them.
Yes.
That no matter how we tried, they actually injured some of the people working with us, trying to care for them. But generally, if you can be kind with them and give them the one-on-one scenario, they forgive, and they're extremely lovely animals, and they come back to be just fine. They just need time and love.
Like all of us, huh?
Yes.
When we go through
Trauma.
and some kind of abusive event, time.
Yes.
And understanding
Yes.
people, understanding caregivers. So let's look then at, I know you have strong feelings about horses going then on to other people. You have to be careful
Absolutely.
who you give them with. So you have a minute
Yes,
to,
I have a
to
minute.
talk about the things that concern you, and when we can call you for help.
Well, anytime you're concerned, call us. What's very helpful is take photos or videos. Nowadays with phones, you can send so much information through to us, which we can send on to the vets. That's very, very important, because it might be something completely normal. People will see a horse lying down and think something's wrong with it. They do lie down, resting its legs, just like humans, we might scotch to one side. They do the same thing. But if you're not sure, it's better to ask us, and we're happy to take the questions. I would beg people, please, if you have horses and you had the money to buy the horse, don't just give it away when it's of no more use to you. Unless you are absolutely certain the person can look after it. I hate to advocate for this, but it is kinder to euthanize an animal than to have it go on to a life of suffering and trauma.
Yes.
And I know that's not a popular viewpoint, but it is the reality.
Right. And you have a tour coming up again? You're going to be off?
Yes, yeah, I'm very happy to say that I've qualified for the Central American and Caribbean Games again.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Barbados won its first medal at equestrian sports at the last CAC Games, so we're hoping to do the same this time again.
And who's your partner in crime that you usually take to ride?
That is Cami, better known as Cam Ross Diamond. She's an amazing mare that we've had a great bond for about 7 years now, and I adore her. She's just a real fiery mare. She's got great personality, and she'll fight for me when it's on the line. So
And that's what it's all about.
She's lovely. She gets spoiled rotten.
I'm sure at the end of the day, nothing can beat that bond between, human and their animal. Thank you so much, Monique.
Thank you for the time.
I hope that, you have learned as much as I have about these amazing creatures, and they all have a right to be here just like we do. So we're going to put the numbers on the screen that you can call if you need assistance, if you see an animal in distress. And thank you so much for watching. Join us again next week when once again we introduce you to another animal.